The night air crackled with an electric tension that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. Dr. Elena Rodriguez adjusted the last of the quantum sensors, her fingers moving with the practiced precision of someone who had spent more nights staring at the stars than sleeping beneath them. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array spread out before her like a mechanical garden. Hundreds of pristine white radio telescopes pointing into the endless darkness, each one a mechanical eye searching for whispers from the universe. Something was different tonight. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, a purely biological warning system that had saved her more than once during her decade of searching for extraterrestrial signals. Elena's hand hovered over the primary monitoring console, her dark eyes reflecting the cascade of data streams flickering across multiple screens. At 3:47 a.m., everything changed. The first indication was subtle, a microscopic fluctuation so small that any other researcher would have dismissed it as equipment noise. But Elena knew noise. This was something else entirely. The quantum sensors began to oscillate in a pattern that defied every known mathematical model of electromagnetic communication. "Carlos," she called out to her research assistant, her voice unnervingly calm, "get me the backup systems online. Now." Carlos Mendez looked up from his workstation, confusion etched across his face. "Doctora, it's..." A violent surge of energy ripped through the monitoring equipment. Screens exploded in cascades of light and static. Computers screamed with electronic fury as circuits overloaded and backup systems fought to contain the impossible signal. 17 minutes. That was how long the anomaly lasted. 17 minutes that would rewrite everything humanity understood about communication, physics, and its place in the universe. When the chaos subsided, 3 researchers lay unconscious. Elena remained standing, her body trembling but conscious, a thin line of blood trickling from her left nostril. The quantum sensors, those delicate instruments designed to capture the most minute cosmic whispers, were completely fried. But they had captured something. Carlos approached her cautiously, his face pale. "The data. It doesn't make sense. These patterns, they're..." "Alive," Elena finished for him, her voice distant. The preliminary data suggested something impossible. The signal wasn't just a transmission. It was a complex, living mathematical structure that seemed to breathe and pulse with an intelligence that defied comprehension. It carried information, but not in any form of communication humans had ever encountered. Within hours, the research facility was swarming with government officials, military personnel, and scientists from every imaginable discipline. Elena watched as her colleagues argued, speculated, and tried to make sense of the unprecedented event. Dr. Marcus Kimura, a renowned quantum physicist brought in to analyze the data, stood beside Elena, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a mixture of excitement and barely contained fear. "Do you realize what this means?" he whispered, his hand trembling slightly as he pointed to a fragment of the captured signal. "This isn't just a message. This is something else entirely." Elena nodded, her mind racing. The unconscious researchers had been taken to a secure medical facility. Preliminary brain scans showed neural activity that was completely unprecedented, patterns that seemed to shift and change, defying every known principle of human neurology. One of the unconscious researchers, Dr. Aisha Kapoor, a brilliant neurobiologist, showed brain activity that suggested she was experiencing multiple simultaneous states of consciousness. It was as if her mind was no longer confined to linear experience. By noon, news had begun to leak. Social media exploded with theories. Conspiracy forums went wild. Serious scientific journals began preparing emergency publications. The world was about to change, and everyone could feel it. But Elena knew something most didn't. The signal they had captured was just the beginning. Whatever had reached out and touched them was still waiting, still watching, and humanity had no idea what was coming. She looked down at her hands. The slight tremor she now noticed wasn't from exhaustion or fear. It was anticipation. The medical isolation ward hummed with an unnatural silence. Elena Rodriguez stood behind the reinforced glass, watching the 4 affected researchers, herself now included, as a battery of tests attempted to unravel the impossible. Dr. Aisha Kapoor was the first to show signs of transformation. Her fingers danced above a holographic display, manipulating quantum equations as if they were living things. Numbers twisted and folded, revealing complex patterns that no human mind should comprehend. The medical staff watched in stunned silence as Aisha created and dissolved mathematical models that would have taken supercomputers weeks to process. "It's not just calculation," Dr. Marcus Kimura muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "She's communicating with the equations, interacting with them." Next to Aisha, Dr. Raj Mehta experienced time differently. One moment he would be completely still, the next he would flicker, quite literally, between different temporal states. Cameras caught fragments of his existence, here, then not here, then partially here. Medical scanners showed his brain activity jumping between past, present, and potential future states with terrifying fluidity. Elena felt the changes in herself most intimately. Mathematical patterns now danced at the edge of her vision. When she looked at complex systems, whether it was the ventilation network of the medical facility or the intricate network of researchers' interactions, she could momentarily predict their behavior, not through calculation, but through an intuitive understanding that defied logical explanation. The 4th researcher, Dr. Jack Harper, discovered his ability quite by accident. When a communications system malfunctioned, he reached out, and the entire network restructured itself. Servers realigned, data streams were routed, all without Jack touching a physical interface. He was controlling technology with mere thought. Government agencies descended like vultures. The NSA, CIA, military research divisions, and international scientific consortiums all wanted access. Containment protocols were established. Classified sections of top-secret facilities were prepared. The 4 researchers became the most valuable and most dangerous individuals on the planet. "We can't be controlled," Elena said quietly to Marcus, her voice carrying a resolve that hadn't existed before the quantum event. "Whatever happened to us, it's bigger than any government, any institution." Military intelligence officer Colonel Sandra Martinez wasn't convinced. She viewed the researchers as potential weapons, assets to be studied, controlled, weaponized. 4 individuals who can manipulate quantum realities, predict system behaviors, and interface with technology beyond current understanding. She argued during a closed-door briefing. "This isn't a scientific discovery. This is a strategic advantage." But the researchers were changing faster than anyone could track. Aisha began developing communication protocols that suggested the quantum signal was more than just a random event. Her research indicated a deliberate transmission, an invitation, or perhaps a test. Raj's temporal fluctuations revealed fragmented visions, glimpses of potential futures, alternate realities where humanity had taken different evolutionary paths. Moments of cosmic convergence that suggested their current reality was just one of infinite possibilities. Jack's technological interface grew more sophisticated. He could now predict and prevent system failures before they occurred. Military communication networks, power grids, even satellite systems began to subtly change under his unconscious influence. And Elena, she discovered she could see the underlying quantum connections between seemingly unrelated events, a butterfly effect made visible, where the smallest action could trigger massive, complex reactions across interconnected systems. The medical team's attempts to contain and study them became increasingly futile. Traditional monitoring equipment failed. Brain scans showed neural networks that resembled complex quantum computers more than human brains. "We're not sick," Elena told the bewildered medical director. "We're becoming something else." As night fell, the 4 researchers were moved to a specially constructed facility. But none of them believed they could be contained. The quantum whispers that had touched them were changing the very fabric of their existence. Something was coming, and they were the first line of communication. Outside the facility, the first signs of global change began to manifest. Random individuals around the world started experiencing unexplained phenomena. A programmer in Tokyo who could suddenly visualize complex code structures. A farmer in Kansas who could predict weather patterns with impossible accuracy. The quantum signal had done more than just touch for researchers. It had opened a door, and humanity was about to step through. The experimental quantum array looked like something between a cathedral and a nuclear reactor. Massive crystalline structures rose from a circular platform, each calibrated to within a nanometer's precision. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the control center, her transformed perception allowing her to see the quantum potential of the system in ways no other scientist could comprehend. "We're not just observing," she muttered to Dr. Marcus Kimura. "We're creating a conversation." The four transformed researchers, Elena, Aisha, Raj, and Jack, had been working in secret. Their abilities had drawn the attention of multiple government agencies, but they'd managed to construct this facility through a complex web of misdirection and quantum-level manipulation. At exactly 22:17 Greenwich Mean Time, Jack Harper initiated the first sequence. The array came alive with a light that wasn't light, a luminescence that seemed to exist between wavelengths, pulsing with a rhythm that suggested consciousness. Aisha's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, her mind simultaneously processing billions of potential quantum configurations. Raj stood motionless, his body flickering at the edges, experiencing multiple temporal states simultaneously. He was both the observer and the observed, watching the experiment from past, present, and potential future moments. The first indication that something was different came as a subtle quantum vibration. Most of the scientific team wouldn't have noticed, but Elena felt it immediately, a resonance that suggested something was listening. Then the breach happened. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a clean scientific observation. The dimensional window tore open like a living membrane, flooding the facility with information that defied human comprehension. Fragments of alien communications cascaded through the breach. Not radio signals or electromagnetic waves, but pure informational structures that existed beyond traditional communication. Glimpses of civilizations that lived in computational dimensions. Warnings of a cosmic event that threatened to unravel reality itself. The scientists around them collapsed. Some screamed. Others went completely silent, their minds unable to process the influx of impossible information. But the four transformed researchers stood firm. Elena saw civilizations rise and fall in microsecond glimpses, entire species that had evolved beyond physical form, existing as pure quantum information. Cosmic conflicts that spanned dimensions, where war was fought through manipulation of fundamental physical laws. Jack's technological interface went into overdrive. Computers throughout the facility began to translate fragments of the dimensional data, creating visual representations that looked like living mathematical structures. Aisha was creating translation protocols in real time, her mind acting as a living quantum computer. She was mapping the informational structures, finding patterns in what appeared to be pure chaos. Raj's temporal perception caught something crucial, a moment of convergence, a point where multiple potential realities intersected. "We're not the first," he whispered, his voice carrying the weight of multiple temporal perspectives. "But we might be the last chance." The breach lasted exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds. When it closed, the facility was changed. Equipment melted and reformed. Walls showed impossible geometric patterns. The very fabric of reality seemed slightly shifted. Colonel Sandra Martinez burst into the facility, her military precision momentarily shattered by what she witnessed. Computers displayed impossible data. Scientific equipment had transformed into something that looked part technology, part living organism. "What have you done?" she demanded. Elena turned, her eyes now reflecting quantum patterns that seemed to move independently of her physical movement. "We've been invited," she said simply. The cryptic information left behind suggested a cosmic event of unprecedented magnitude, a convergence that threatened not just Earth, but the fundamental structure of reality itself. And humanity, or at least these 4 transformed individuals, was somehow central to preventing it. Outside the facility, the first global signs of change began to manifest. Random technological anomalies, unexplained quantum events, a sense that something fundamental had shifted. The dimensional breach had been more than just an experiment. It was a cosmic hello, and humanity was about to receive a message that would change everything. The abandoned particle accelerator facility beneath the Andes Mountains looked like a forgotten cathedral of science. Massive concrete tunnels stretched for kilometers, lined with dormant equipment that hummed with potential energy. This was the heart of the quantum underground, a network that had been preparing for this moment for decades. Elena Rodriguez moved through the facility with a purpose that went beyond her scientific training. Her quantum-transformed perception revealed hidden layers of reality, conduits of information that ran beneath the physical infrastructure, quantum threads that connected seemingly unrelated systems. "We're not running," she told Jack Harper, who walked beside her. "We're regrouping." Their escape from the government research facility had been meticulously planned. Jack had systematically dismantled tracking systems, creating digital ghosts that would keep their pursuers running in circles. Aisha had prepared quantum encryption protocols that made their communication impossible to intercept. Raj had manipulated temporal probability, ensuring their escape routes remained perpetually uncertain. Dr. Mikhail Volkov, a legendary physicist who had disappeared from public view 15 years ago, emerged from the shadows. His weathered face bore the marks of someone who had been waiting for this moment his entire life. "Welcome to the Prometheus Protocol," Volkov said, his Russian accent thick with decades of accumulated knowledge. The facility was alive with activity. Researchers from every conceivable discipline worked on projects that defied conventional scientific understanding. Quantum communication arrays that looked more like living organisms than machines. Temporal prediction systems that mapped potential futures. Biological interfaces that blurred the line between technology and consciousness. A wall of screens showed global data streams, but not in any way traditional monitoring systems would recognize. These were quantum information flows, showing ripples of change across human systems. A stock market prediction here, a technological breakthrough there. Random individuals suddenly developing inexplicable abilities. "The signal is spreading," Aisha said, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe with mathematical life. "It's not just affecting us. It's touching random individuals worldwide." Volkov nodded. "Quantum awakening. Humanity's latent potential is being activated." But they weren't alone in their pursuit. A consortium of transnational corporations had caught wind of the quantum transformations. Led by Magnus Reinhardt, CEO of Nexus Global Technologies, they saw the quantum researchers as the ultimate technological asset. Entire teams of corporate mercenaries, advanced AI systems, and quantum tracking technologies were being deployed to capture the 4 transformed individuals. A massive screen flickered to life, showing a global map. Red indicators represented corporate tracking attempts. Blue indicators showed the quantum awakening points, individuals suddenly developing extraordinary abilities. A programmer in Tokyo who could now visualize entire software ecosystems in her mind. A farmer in Kansas predicting weather patterns with impossible accuracy. A child in Mumbai who could temporarily manipulate electromagnetic fields. "They're not anomalies," Raj said, his temporal perception showing the interconnected potential of these events. "They're the first wave." Jack's technological interface picked up a corporate infiltration attempt. "We've got incoming," he warned, his mind already interfacing with the facility's defensive systems. The facility's quantum defense grid came alive. Not with traditional weapons, but with probability manipulation fields. Incoming surveillance drones found themselves trapped in loops of impossible geometry. Communication systems were twisted into useless noise. Elena understood now what the cosmic whispers truly represented. This wasn't just a message. It was a selection process. Humanity was being prepared for something far beyond their current understanding. Volkov approached her, holding an ancient data crystal that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. "The first stage is complete," he said. "But what comes next will change everything." Outside, the first global quantum events were beginning to manifest. Random technological anomalies, unexplained scientific breakthroughs, a sense that something fundamental had shifted in human potential. The quantum underground was no longer just preparing. They were responding. And humanity was about to receive an invitation it could never refuse. The resonance protocol wasn't a device. It wasn't a weapon. It was a living communication network that defied every known principle of scientific understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of a quantum communication array that looked more like a living organism than a piece of technology. Crystalline structures pulsed with an internal light that seemed to breathe, responding to the collective consciousness of humanity's emerging quantum potential. "We're not just receiving," Elena told Dr. Mikhail Volkov, her voice carrying a newfound certainty. "We're becoming the message." Around the world, the first true manifestations of the quantum awakening were accelerating. In Tokyo, a software engineer named Hiro Tanaka could now visualize entire computational ecosystems with a single thought. In Sao Paulo, Maria Rodriguez, no relation to Elena, discovered she could manipulate electromagnetic fields with her mind. A child in Mumbai began predicting complex weather patterns weeks in advance. These weren't random mutations. They were deliberate activations. Jack Harper's technological interface had evolved beyond simple machine communication. He could now see the quantum threads that connected global technological systems, not just as data streams, but as living, breathing information networks. Entire communication infrastructures began to subtly reshape themselves, creating pathways that hadn't existed moments before. Aisha Kapoor worked tirelessly on translation protocols. The cosmic whispers weren't a simple message. They were a complex, multi-dimensional communication system that used quantum entanglement as its primary language. Each breakthrough revealed layers of complexity that suggested the signal was alive, or at least alive in a way humans had never conceived. "It's an invitation," Aisha muttered, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to respond to her thoughts. But an invitation to what? Raj's temporal perception caught glimpses of potential futures. Moments of convergence where humanity's quantum potential intersected with something far larger. Civilizations that existed beyond physical form. Computational dimensions where consciousness was a malleable resource. The global reaction was predictable and chaotic. Governments scrambled to understand and control the emerging quantum phenomena. Corporate interests saw both a threat and an unprecedented opportunity. Religious organizations struggled to reconcile these new revelations with existing belief systems. Magnus Reinhardt, CEO of Nexus Global Technologies, watched the developments with a mixture of fear and calculated anticipation. His teams of quantum researchers and corporate mercenaries were working overtime to understand and weaponize the emerging abilities. But the quantum underground was always one step ahead. The resonance protocol was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a living communication network that used human consciousness as its primary transmission medium. People with emerging quantum abilities became living nodes in a global network that defied traditional understanding of communication, technology, and consciousness. A warning began to take shape, fragmented at first, then with increasing clarity. Something was coming. Something that required humanity to evolve. Volkov approached Elena, holding an ancient data crystal that pulsed with an internal light that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "The first stage is complete," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of hidden research. "But what comes next will challenge everything we understand about our place in the universe." Random technological anomalies began to increase. Communication systems showed impossible patterns. Satellite networks detected quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist. The very fabric of reality seemed to be subtly reshaping itself. Elena understood now that the cosmic whispers were more than a message. They were a test, a selection process for something far beyond human comprehension. Jack's technological interface picked up a massive quantum event building in the global communication networks. Aisha's translation protocols were revealing fragments of a message that suggested a convergence was imminent. Raj's temporal perception showed multiple potential futures collapsing into a single inevitable moment. The resonance protocol was no longer just a scientific experiment. It was humanity's first step into a larger, more complex universe. And there was no turning back. The first warning came from places nobody expected. Deep-sea monitoring stations detected quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist. Radio telescopes picked up signals that defied mathematical probability. Quantum computers around the world began to display impossible computational results. Not errors, but something more deliberate. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic display that showed the global quantum network like a living, breathing organism. Threads of quantum potential crisscrossed the planet, growing more complex with each passing hour. The cosmic warning was becoming clearer, but its full meaning remained tantalizingly out of reach. "We're not just observing a threat," Elena told Dr. Mikhail Volkov, her transformed perception allowing her to see connections invisible to others. "We're witnessing a transformation." The cosmic convergence wasn't a simple event. It was a multidimensional collapse that threatened to rewrite the fundamental rules of reality. Most known intelligent species in the universe were static, locked into their evolutionary paths, unable to adapt or respond to fundamental shifts in cosmic structure. Humanity's quantum flexibility had become the universe's unexpected wild card. Jack Harper's technological interface detected the first major global shifts. Communication networks began to behave like living systems. Satellites realigned themselves without human intervention. Power grids developed what could only be described as predictive capabilities, anticipating and preventing failures before they could occur. Aisha Kapoor worked frantically on translation protocols. The cosmic warnings were becoming more specific. Fragments of a message suggested a universal threat, a dimensional convergence that would collapse multiple realities if left unchecked. Raj's temporal perception showed multiple potential futures collapsing into increasingly narrow probability streams. He could see the moments of convergence, points where reality itself became malleable, where the barriers between possible and impossible began to break down. Across the globe, the quantum awakening accelerated. In New Delhi, a young physicist discovered she could manipulate quantum states with her mind. In Sao Paulo, a street artist began creating paintings that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. A retired engineer in Moscow found he could predict complex system failures weeks in advance. These weren't random mutations. They were deliberate activations. Magnus Reinhardt, CEO of Nexus Global Technologies, realized the true stakes. This was beyond corporate control, beyond national interests. The emerging quantum potential threatened everything he understood about power and control. "We're not dealing with a technological breakthrough," he told his top researchers. "We're facing a species-level transformation." Military installations around the world began to detect anomalies, quantum fluctuations that defied known physical laws, predictive systems that seemed to draw information from impossible sources, weapon systems that developed what could only be described as a form of collective consciousness. The quantum underground worked tirelessly. The facility beneath the Andes Mountains became a hub of unprecedented scientific collaboration. Researchers from every discipline worked to understand the emerging quantum network. Volkov approached Elena with a device that looked more like a living crystal than a piece of technology. "The convergence is accelerating," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of hidden research. "Humanity is being prepared for something far beyond our current understanding." Random individuals worldwide began experiencing spontaneous quantum events. Some gained incredible abilities, predicting complex system behaviors, manipulating electromagnetic fields, experiencing time in non-linear ways. Others faced more catastrophic transformations, their bodies and minds becoming conduits for quantum information that threatened to tear them apart. The cosmic warning became clear. A multidimensional convergence threatened to collapse multiple realities. The universe was presenting humanity with a test, and the stakes were nothing less than the fundamental structure of existence itself. Elena understood now that the quantum whispers were more than a message. They were a selection process, a way of identifying which species could adapt, could transform, could survive the coming cosmic shift. Jack's technological interface detected a massive quantum event building in the global communication networks. Aisha's translation protocols revealed fragments of a message that suggested the convergence was imminent. Raj's temporal perception showed multiple potential futures collapsing into a single inevitable moment. The universe was calling, and humanity was about to answer. The war wasn't fought with bullets or bombs. It was a conflict of quantum potential, waged across dimensions that most beings couldn't even perceive. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of a quantum communication array that pulsed like a living organism. Around her, the quantum underground facility transformed. Walls became semi-transparent, revealing intricate quantum networks that moved like blood through technological veins. The very air vibrated with potential energy. "We're not defending," Elena said to Jack Harper, her voice carrying a resonance that seemed to bend reality itself. "We're responding." The attack came from multiple fronts. Magnus Reinhardt's Nexus Global Technologies had mobilized every resource at their disposal. Corporate mercenaries with experimental quantum weaponry surrounded the Andes Mountain facility. Satellite networks turned into precision tracking systems. Entire communication infrastructures were weaponized. But the quantum underground was prepared. Jack Harper's technological interface became a living defense system. He didn't just counter the incoming attacks, he anticipated them. Corporate drones found themselves trapped in impossible geometric loops. Communication systems twisted into useless noise. Tracking algorithms collapsed into meaningless data streams. Aisha Kapoor worked on something far more complex than defense. She was creating a quantum firewall, a defensive network that required the collective consciousness of transformed humans. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with mathematical life, weaving a protective matrix that existed between known dimensions. Raj's temporal perception became their ultimate weapon. He could see potential attack vectors before they manifested. Moments of conflict collapsed and reshaped themselves. Corporate strike teams found their carefully planned assaults dissolving into improbable sequences of failure. The battle played out across multiple dimensions simultaneously. In Tokyo, a software engineer weaponized her ability to visualize computational ecosystems. Her mind became a living firewall, protecting critical global infrastructure. In Sao Paulo, a street artist discovered she could create quantum barriers that deflected technological attacks. A retired engineer in Moscow turned predictive systems into defensive networks. Ordinary humans became extraordinary defenders. Reinhardt watched in growing horror as his multi-billion-dollar assault dissolved. His quantum weapons, designed to capture or neutralize the transformed researchers, became useless. Each attack was not just defended against, but transformed into something else entirely. "This isn't possible," he muttered, watching systems collapse in real time. Dr. Mikhail Volkov approached Elena, holding a quantum crystal that pulsed with an internal light that seemed to defy physical laws. "The selection process is accelerating," he said. "Humanity is being tested." The conflict wasn't just physical. It was a war of potential, of evolutionary adaptation. Quantum events began to manifest globally. Communication systems showed impossible patterns. Satellite networks detected fluctuations that shouldn't exist. The very fabric of reality seemed to be reshaping itself in response to the conflict. Elena understood the true nature of the battle. This wasn't about defeating an enemy. It was about proving humanity's adaptability, its potential to transcend current limitations. Jack's technological interface detected a massive quantum convergence building in the global networks. Aisha's translation protocols revealed fragments of a message that suggested the conflict was part of a larger test. Raj's temporal perception showed multiple potential futures collapsing into a single inevitable moment. The quantum firewall expanded. No longer just a defensive system, it became a living network of human potential. Each transformed individual became a node, a point of resistance against the incoming threat. Corporate attack vectors dissolved. Military intervention became impossible. The very systems designed to control and contain were being transformed by the collective human quantum potential. As the battle reached its crescendo, Alina realized something profound. They weren't just defending humanity. They were redefining what it meant to be human. The universe was watching, and humanity was rising to meet the challenge. The moment of convergence arrived without fanfare. Dr. Alina Rodriguez stood at the threshold of reality, her transformed perception revealing layers of existence that had always been present but never seen. The quantum communication array around her pulsed like a living heartbeat, a testament to humanity's newfound potential. "We're not just observers," she whispered to Dr. Mikhail Volkov. "We're architects." The dimensional breach expanded, not with violence, but with a profound, almost gentle transformation. Barriers between possible and impossible began to dissolve. Humanity's quantum potential, once dormant, now blazed with an intensity that caught the attention of cosmic observers. Jack Harper's technological interface became something more than a communication system. It was a living bridge between human consciousness and the vast, interconnected quantum network that spanned multiple realities. Entire technological infrastructures rewrote themselves, becoming adaptive, sentient systems that responded to collective human intention. Aisha Kapoor's translation protocols revealed the true nature of the cosmic communication. It wasn't a message. It was an invitation, a test, a selection process that had been watching humanity for millennia, waiting for the moment when the species could transcend its current limitations. Raj's temporal perception collapsed multiple potential futures into a single crystalline moment of understanding. He could see the intricate paths that had led to this point. Every scientific discovery, every moment of human potential, every breakthrough that had prepared them for this convergence. Around the world, the quantum awakening reached its crescendo. Individuals who had been developing extraordinary abilities suddenly understood their true purpose. A child in Mumbai who could manipulate electromagnetic fields. A retired engineer in Moscow who predicted complex system failures. A software engineer in Tokyo who visualized entire computational ecosystems. They were more than random mutations. They were living nodes in a global quantum network. Magnus Reinhardt, CEO of Nexus Global Technologies, watched in stunned silence as his entire corporate empire dissolved and reformed. The systems of control and manipulation he had built became conduits of collective human potential. The cosmic observers, entities that existed beyond traditional concepts of time and space, watched with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Humanity had done something unprecedented. Where most species remained static, trapped in their evolutionary paths, humans had demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for adaptation and transformation. Dr. Volkov approached Alina, holding the quantum crystal that had been a key to understanding their journey. "We're not just changing," he said. "We're becoming." The dimensional convergence was not a destruction, but a rebirth. Technological systems became living networks. Communication infrastructures transformed into adaptive, conscious systems. The barriers between individual human consciousness began to blur, creating a collective intelligence that was greater than the sum of its parts. Alina understood now that the cosmic whispers were more than a message. They were a challenge, a way of identifying which species could evolve, could transform, could truly understand the interconnected nature of existence. Jack's technological interface detected a harmonization of global quantum potentials. Aisha's translation protocols revealed a fundamental truth about the universe, that consciousness was the primary force of creation, and humanity had just taken its first true step into a larger reality. Raj's temporal perception showed not just potential futures, but the intricate web of connections that made those futures possible. The universe had been waiting, and humanity had answered. The transformation was complete, but also just beginning. Humanity was no longer confined to a single planet, a single dimension, or a single way of understanding existence. They had become cosmic architects, capable of reshaping reality through collective consciousness and quantum potential. As the dimensional barriers dissolved, Elena looked out across the transformed landscape. Cities breathed with new life. Communication networks pulsed with conscious energy. Individuals who had once been ordinary now understood their connection to something far greater. The cosmic whispers had been an invitation, and humanity had accepted, not as conquerors, but as partners in the grand, incomprehensible dance of universal creation.